When it rains we get trapped for days on the peninsula. The hazards of our primrose path south of a swollen river.
Hey everyone, so been asked to do a video on charcoal forges. Now I mean that specifically charcoal, not just solid fuel forges, but charcoal forges. Now it's a good beginner forge really, because when it comes down to it, when you think of a blacksmith forge or a solid fuel forge, you think of coke or you think of coal as being the fuel, and there seems to be a bit of a misunderstanding that coke and coal are better forging fuels, and just objectively better. And frankly that's not true. When it comes to the ability for heat output, they all have the same BTU rating of the amount of heat that they can put out, which means you can achieve a temperature in a charcoal forge that you can achieve any temperature that you can achieve in a coke forge or a coal forge. So when it comes down to it, the biggest difference is going to be how fast you go through the fuel. Charcoal is at the bottom end of that spectrum in terms of efficiency for fuel. Coke lasts a lot longer before you have to change it out. Charcoal, you've got to keep fueling the fire, so to speak. However, it's very difficult to make coke at home. It's very difficult to make coal at home, but you can make charcoal in your backyard with nothing but more than a 44-gallon drum and a little bit of elbow grease. So its availability, its price, and the ability to be able to make it yourself really make it a superior fuel for people who are doing this as, say, a hobby, or even people who are doing it seriously like me. I have a particularly good setup because I actually am on the delivery path of the biggest charcoalier in Tasmania, so he just doesn't even charge me delivery fee. I just say when I need charcoal and he drops off big old bags of it. That may not be the case for everybody else who uses it, but it's certainly the case for me, so it works quite well. And I can get forge welding heat no problems in this. I can get smelting heat no problems in this. And frankly, charcoal has been used for centuries by people simply because of the fact you can make it on the road. And a lot of artisans doing metal work and smelting had to do things mobile with materials that they had on hand at the site. So charcoal is one of those things. You can actually see some great videos where they will build a smelting furnace out of nothing but mud and charcoal. Some great videos. I'll link one up here for you to actually have a look at. But what I've been asked to sort of do a video on is not specifically that charcoal forges are superior in my opinion, but how to work them. Because I've made a lot of comments, because I do use a gas forge from time to time when I need to, but I don't like them. Now the reason I don't like them is because they are an all or nothing heat. Now there are vertical gas forges where you can actually have a much more controlled heat, much more like a fire pot style solid fuel forge. That is very true, you can make those. However, in a solid fuel forge you can control where the heat is on your steel very easily, and you can get very effective heats. That is half-inch round 5160. You can get very good heats using in very specific areas. Now this forge is probably version 4 of forges that I've used, because the design of it's very important, and this meets my needs beautifully. I've had a lot of people say, oh, it's quite small, but really this is almost all fire pot. It's quite a big area. I don't need much more than that. So the shape and size of your forge is going to be important. Now this, as you know, is the tuya, the entrance there, and it's where the air comes in and goes up through a bottom blast into a fire pot that is a funnel shape. Now my funnel is probably 3 inches deep. A lot of people I've seen 6 and even 8-inch deep funnels. You don't need that much, because what happens is you're blowing air in the bottom of the funnel and it hits fuel that you've got in there. The fuel is hot, so it consumes the oxygen, the air that is being pumped in, and turns that air into heat. Now if the air manages to reach your you've got such a volume of air coming in that it reaches your work, it's going to actually have a cooling effect on it as the air rushes past it. You need to actually have a suitable volume of fuel underneath the work so that it eats up all of the air coming through and turns it into heat, which then heats your work instead of cooling it down or pushing too much air past it, which is going to inhibit forge welds, etc., etc., etc. So there is a sort of a science to the depth that you want to get from your fire pot. But once again, it's dependent on the actual task that you're going to be doing. For the sort of size work that I do, a 3-inch deep fire pot is more than enough. It's lovely. It actually does a really great job. And if I'm actually going to be putting a crucible in here or doing a forge weld, I can put these sides up and mound my charcoal, effectively creating a deeper fire pot if I need one. You can always make a deeper fire pot. Very hard to make a shallower fire pot on the fly like that. So one thing that, a concept that I've had to try and explain to people in the past, which I'll try and eloquently describe now, is if you've ever tried doing any sort of survival stuff where you use a fire starter to ignite a tinder bundle to be able to start a fire, you really have to blow on it, and blowing on it is an art form. There is an art to how you blow on it. And you'll notice that you don't go because that blows the fire out. You don't breathe on it like because that doesn't push the air fast enough. You need to do a combination of both. You need to have both the volume and the speed, and enough of each to be able to create the rushing sensation. You'll hear the sound the fire makes as the rushing sound as it gets the right mix of air and the volume of air. So speed and volume are both important. Now you would have seen Alex Steele go through this if you follow his channel. When he has his new gas forge with a ribbon burner in it and he's trying to pump air in, and he just puts a bigger pump on there and expects it to work, and obviously it didn't. And it's because you need more volume, not just speed. Now that pump did actually pump more volume as well, and you're probably thinking, oh, it also moves volume. Yes, it does, but it's going to be inhibited by the size of the pipe, because air acts like a fluid. When you see an empty pipe, it's not actually empty, it's full of air. So there's only so much air that can go through it at any given time, which is going to inhibit the rate. So just like when you're blowing on that tinder bundle, in order to get the rushing sound that you want, which means that the fire is actually being fed properly without being put out, you need to have the right volume and the right speed. So have a listen very closely to this. I'll bring you in and you'll hear what I mean. Okay, I'm going to be quiet and have a listen. Hear that rushing sound? That's what you want to hear. That means you have the right mix. Straighten you up there. The right mix of both speed and volume, and that's why I love crank blowers, because if you get a crank blower that is that nice sort of paddle driven geared setup, it's moving as much air as you want it to because you control the speed, and it controls both the speed of the air and the amount that's actually being sucked in. So I can actually control the heat of my fire very effectively simply by cranking this faster or slower. Now, different crank blowers do this in different ways, obviously, so you find the one that fits you, but it's why I like them. It is when you start getting used to it and the muscle memory kicks in, you can start unconsciously almost controlling the temperature of your fire as you need it by listening to the raw sound and adjusting the speed of the crank. Now, a crank blower in a charcoal forge requires no power. It doesn't require you to change out gas bottles or anything like that. It allows you to have a very, very temperature controllable fire with no other accoutrement in this whole setup. So let's just say I only want the heat to be in one specific area. I can actually take water in a can out of my mank tank and cool certain parts of my fire. You want to be careful doing this because you can actually create a steam explosion. So gently cool regions of my fire, and it'll take a long time for that water to evaporate off or steam off and for those areas to get hot again. So if you're controlling, you can actually get down to pinpoint heats on your work using a solid fuel forge. Any solid fuel forge does this, but once again, careful of steam explosions. It's a practiced technique. But I think I've seen John Switzer at Black Bear Forge do it before as well. He uses it in his solid fuel forge. But it's a great method if you ever need to get isolated heats, because even a fire pot, which is almost entirely fire pot, this is a foot square fire pot in there, that will heat about 6 to 8 inches of a workpiece at a time. And that's realistically all you're going to need. If you want to get more, you can actually do what's called heat shielding, which is where, let's just say you're trying to quench a Bowie knife with a big blade that you need more than 6 to 8 inches of heat. You can actually cover it while it's in the fire, and it bounces the heat back and spreads it further. That controllability you can't do in a gas forge. It's all or nothing. You heat the entire inside of a gas forge or none of the inside of a gas forge, with the exception of the vertical gas forges that we talked about before. So it's another reason why I like it. However, one thing that you will do, I have no idea how this works. I'm not going to pretend to know how this works, but I am going to explain what happens. The more you get used to using charcoal forges, the more you can tell what color your steel is in there, because you can't see it. You've got to cover it up. So you can start telling what color the steel is by the smell. Now that sounds weird, but the smell of the heat, you start being able to pick it out. Now this isn't just charcoal forges, of course, it's all solid fuel forges. But hot metal has a smell. When you're in a gas forge, you can't tell what it is, but you can look into a gas forge to look at what color it is. It is going to be obscured by the ambient light of the gas forge, but you can start, after a while, telling when your work is ready to pull out just by the smell. It's something that I really quite enjoy. But yeah, there's always the argument of, and people have done extensive, exhaustive videos on this. People have had arguments online about this, like which forge type is superior. The superior forge type is the one that suits your needs the most, and that's why I've got multiple. I have a small breaking down coal forge. I have this larger one that's for most of my work. I have a gas forge, and I'm thinking of building 2 other gas forges and a channel forge, which is a charcoal forge which has a U shape that you can pass work through, and it's got blowers in the side, and so air goes in and through the charcoal for long pieces. Those projects are in the works, but multiple forges mean a wider range of work that I can do with more convenience, because certain forge types are designed for certain projects and activities. You wouldn't try, like, doing a sword in this forge is possible, but in a channel forge, it's much easier. Doing an axe in a channel forge is possible, but doing it in one of these, in a standard bottom blast fire pot, much easier. So, when it comes down to it, find the forge that works best for you. The charcoal has always had a special place in my heart, just because of its ease of access. We actually had a question on the ForgeCast, the podcast of blacksmithing and bladesmithing that I co-hosted with Sam Towns, which you should definitely check out. We had a question on there of where can I get coke? I can't find coke anywhere. And our answer was basically, why do you feel the need to use coke? Because you can just use charcoal. And we went into quite a bit of detail about it, and I highly suggest you check out that video. But yeah, it's basically, I wanted to do this video to squash the myth that you need coke, that you need coal or anthracite, bituminous coal. You don't need it. Charcoal will do the job just fine. Yes, you go through it a bit faster, but it's not that fast. It's not so fast. I do this full time, at least 8 hours a day, and I don't go through it that fast, I can tell you, because quality charcoal makes the difference. The last part of this video has got to be about the fact you should never use charcoal briquettes that you see for char grilling in barbecues and things like that. Don't do it. It's not worth it. They are held together with a binder that is going to just basically fault ash and clog up your entire tuya system. You'll never get the right amount of heat out of them. The fuel that you use in charcoal matters, and not all charcoals are built the same. That comes as a surprise to a lot of people. They think that charcoal is charcoal, but it's not. Different charcoals make a huge difference. A good example is this. This stuff here is not a charcoal briquette. This is made out of coconut fiber. And it is a renewable resource that's supposed to be more green and economically friendly and all that sort of thing, because it is compressed coconut fiber that has been charcoaled. This burns beautifully. It really does. But the temperature that you will get out of it will never be higher than what you need to properly sear a steak. If you're trying to forge off this stuff, you'll never reach those temperatures, no matter how much or how fast you pump air into it. They're just limited. You need wood charcoal. Now, wood charcoal narrows it down to any of the millions of species of wood, and there are a lot. Put that back over there. Hardwood lump charcoal is the type that you want. Now, there are not any hardwood lump charcoal, because if you go to your local hardware store and buy hardwood lump charcoal aimed for barbecues, and you just get, you know, the cheapest you can find, likely is going to be made of mangrove, which is a very common hardwood lump charcoal wood. And mangrove charcoal is ashy. It will just turn to ash so much. Jarrah is, on the other hand, is a phenomenal hardwood for charcoal, because it doesn't really ash up that much, and it burns for a long time. It's very dense, tight-grained wood. Old Japanese, the traditional Japanese forges, I've recently learned, almost use exclusively pine charcoal. It burns really fast. Now that's a softwood, that's not even hardwood. That burns through very fast, and they have to constantly keep lumping it on. However, A, it's traditional, and B, they get insane heats with it because it burns so fast. Because when something burns fast, it burns intensely. So for general purpose forging like this, hardwood lump charcoal is where it's at. It will burn slow enough that you don't need to wear yourself out, but it will burn hot enough that you can actually achieve forge welding temperatures with a little hand crank blower like this, which you wouldn't think is possible, but it absolutely is. The intensity that you can achieve with something as small as this is phenomenal. And if you do have power in your forge, chuck a hairdryer in there with an air gate where you can actually control the flow, and you can achieve phenomenal temperatures with no effort whatsoever. Just make sure you keep the fuel on it. So, last point. Clinker is a big problem with solid fuel forges. All that unburnable stuff that sort of just builds up into the donut of doom around your tuya, and you start losing heat, and you have to fish them out, and it's all a big mess. Charcoal, no clinker at all, ever. Just what, or that coconut stuff does. That forms clinker. Briquettes will form a kind of clinker sometimes, depending on the brand of briquette. Hardwood lump charcoal, no clinker, never, ever. As simple as that. It takes a long time to cool down, which can be a problem if you have to walk away and leave your forge. It is a fire hazard if you're not careful, so you have to take precautions. But yeah, I've actually been forging, gone off to my finishing shed, and literally been in there for 3 hours, and then come back and started cranking and got the fire back up to a forging heat within about 10-15 minutes. It's incredible the amount of time it can last for. So yeah, when you're thinking about building a solid fuel forge, don't dismiss charcoal. Don't think that you need to get coke. Don't think that you need to get coal. Charcoal's great. Just form a good relationship with your local charcoal here. Don't forget, a lot of restaurants work with charcoal. Ask them who they get their charcoal from, and you can get it delivered to your house. So until that point, yeah, don't disregard charcoal just because you think that it is inferior to coke or to coal. Anyway, I'm going to get back to it because I've got a lot of work to do, and I'll catch you guys on the next video. Bye.
When it rains, we get trapped for days on the peninsula. The hazards of our primrose path south of a swollen river. The how I cut all the lights went out, and I walk you home and back again. Oh, you a midnight jazz